But my advice is never fly in the day of your cruise. You just don't do it. And people have to learn. Unfortunately, a lot of times people have to learn the hard way because they just say, well, what, that's not going to happen to me. Well, you can't control flight delays and things like that.
Welcome back to another episode of World Travel Made Easy with Itinerary Boss. Today, I have the pleasure of bringing on Paul Thornton, who hosts the Joy of Cruising podcast. I got the chance to connect with Paul when he had reached out and excited for him to share his area of expertise in cruising. Also, another fun fact just through our first conversation, he's actually located right up the street from me here in Charlotte and Mooresville and used to be in the medical field. So we share that same passion, but really excited to bring him on. How's it going, Paul?
Things are fine, other than I have a cold. So, so your listeners are going to have to not only put up with my Brooklyn monotone, but my Brooklyn monotone with a cold.
Yeah, hey, it's getting cold. I know in Charlotte we never get snow, and there was some snow on the ground today. So that could be the reason is going from our nice weather to now we're feeling like we're in the Northeast or Midwest.
Yep, yep.
So yeah, no, appreciate you coming on. I know you really focus in on travel and on cruising in the travel industry, and that's actually an area that I've personally never been on a cruise. So that's when we started talking. I said, "Hey, why don't you come on? You can share that area of expertise." My audience, I have a lot of people that like to cruise, family, also just couples who sometimes just want to take a cruise to different places around the world. So would love to just kind of hear your background story around how'd you first get into cruising and why is that really your preferred way of traveling?
Yeah, and I suspect a lot of your listeners have never been on a cruise. Um, for those who are on the fence, I'll tell you this. Well over 90% of all first-time cruisers get hooked on their first cruise. So your odds are pretty good. Now there are some who, for whatever reason, it's just not for them. Uh, but for those who do try it, it usually works out, and they often become uh, cruisaholics. A lot of times they'll just, if they like to travel, they'll enjoy cruising, but it may not necessarily be their preferred way to travel. My wife and I are kind of opposites. She likes to travel. She can, cruising is sort of take it or leave it, whereas I am absolutely passionate about cruising and tend not to do much regular land travel. Although I got one coming up because I have to keep in mind there's two of us, so I have to keep the better half happy.
Yep. Yep. Where are you headed for your land travel?
Going to Dubai.
Nice. Have you ever
Yeah,
been?
yeah. No, no, but one of the, I've written some books that feature, people who are cruisers and have interesting stories to tell. And one that I say couple, actually, it's a mom and an infant that I featured in my last book, The Joy of Cruising Again. Um, she took him to Dubai at 2 years old. And so I immediately got jealous and immediately put it on my bucket list. And so we're now going to Dubai.
That's cool. That is very cool. I've never been. I've heard good things. Obviously, it's a little bit of a hike over, but being in Charlotte, it's, we have good flight logistics. That's pretty cool. I actually had a recent guest who I brought on. They host a YouTube channel and show called Transit Unplugged TV, and they were talking about just taking when you go to different places, taking the public transportation, sometimes the double decker buses, and sometimes you learn a lot there than you wouldn't learn just going and doing, what is shown on social media. And he talked about how, he learned about something from 1893 specific to Chicago, which then took him down a rabbit hole, which then now that's something he puts into his travel plans wherever he goes. And I think that's pretty cool. That's funny that, that book gave you that, bucket list trip now that you're going on, which is
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. But getting into cruising, I did a lot of land travel leading up to cruising. Uh, we used to like the all-inclusive resorts. They were kind of big in like Jamaica
Hmm.
and the Caribbean, and so we did a lot of that, and I loved it. I used to say all-inclusives are gonna lose money on me because I'm gonna get my fees worth, but and then I started hearing about cruising, and it kind of sounded like almost too good to be true. And all inclusive, or kind of an all inclusive, they don't include alcohol on cruises like they do at a lot of all inclusives, but almost all inclusive. But instead of getting to experience one destination, in a typical cruise, you get to experience, several. I mean, a 7 week, I'm sorry, a 7 day cruise, you'll generally have three countries, three stops. So, it kind of appealed to me, but I was worried about seasickness. I
Hmm.
didn't want to spend all this money. And back then, my first cruise, 1988, it was a lot of money, or to me, it was a lot of money. I was nervous about, you get on a cruise, you get seasick on the first day, and then you're laid up in your room for the whole week you're on the cruise. So that was my big hesitation. Uh, but I got over that hesitation, took a cruise, and like most people, like over 90%, I fell in love.
Yeah, no, I laughed. I've never heard of cruiseaholics, so that's something that that's pretty cool, and I like that term, and I mean, that statistic's pretty impressive. I guess a lot of times when people are thinking about, for you, you had that, I wouldn't call it analysis paralysis, you just had that hesitation of, well, I don't want to get seasick.
Right.
So I guess, are there times that that has happened, or are there best practices that you put in place? Because a lot of the times it's putting in place some of those preparations before travel to make sure
Yeah.
once you're there you get to enjoy it. So I don't know if there's anything you do specific, or in any type of like supplements or anything like that that you do or bring on board just to be safe.
Yeah, there's nothing that I do. I have never been seasick. My wife has occasionally uh, been seasick. She also has vertigo, which I
Okay.
suspect vertigo and seasickness, I'm thinking they're probably going to have some relation. Uh, there are a lot of things you can do. There are a lot of, I mean, there's a whole cottage industry in selling tablets and patches and all kinds of remedies. You can get them at Walmart. You can get them on Amazon. A lot of travel bloggers and vloggers will have a site, and they'll sell their own branded things. And then there are some home remedies. Once you get on a ship, uh, I hear the inside tip from the crew, when as far as seasickness, is to eat a green apple. Uh,
Okay.
obviously, obviously that's not something you pack, but you should have no trouble getting that. But I heard that specifically from a crew member. So there's all kind of things that people do and pay for, and some not pay for. Uh, but I haven't had that issue.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's always helpful. Just from I try to help, people who and my customers, right? When you're the biggest part is right, taking step one, planning it, then going and doing it. But I think getting over that first hesitation is always like, well, once I get there, what happens if this happens? And getting out of your own mind and just helping prepare them. So that is helpful. And those inside tips, once you've done it, are always super helpful. I
But your general mindset is good, and that
yeah.
is a mindset of planning.
Yes.
You know, the biggest, I mean, it's the same really with a land trip. I was
Yeah.
going to say the biggest difference. It's not really a difference, but a big thing about going on a cruise is planning. You can't, you shouldn't like do things spontaneously when you go on a cruise. Generally, that's going to cost you money.
Yeah.
So if you think through things and if you plan things, you can do a better job of uh, pre-trip budgeting
Mhm.
and also readiness once you're on board.
Are there any specifics once, because I've, right, first thing that comes to my mind is land trips. I mean, planning, right? If you want to go eat at some of the top restaurants, you got to have reservations. If you want to do tours and not be standing in line for a couple hours, right? You got to plan, skip the line, right? Just a lot of logistical things. But I haven't been on a cruise, so it'd be good if there's any specifics to hacks to save people money. Feel free to share those.
Yeah, well, the, the thing is, maybe you don't want to save money, but maybe you want to get the most efficient return on your investment.
Hmm.
For instance, you can save money on a cruise. You can. I mean, it's very similar to an all-inclusive vacation in that you can book and pay for your cruise. Once you pay in full, you almost don't have to spend another penny once you get on board. So you can eat totally. I don't want to say for free. Nothing's
Yeah.
free, but included in your fare. Never have to pay a penny for food, and that will get you in like on most cruise ships. Just about all cruise ships have a buffet
Hmm.
that serves breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So that's included. All cruise ships have a main dining room that serves, a kind of a more formal breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's included. And then a lot of cruise ships have complimentary venues that are included. Well, obviously, if they're complimentary, they're included. But they're foods that are separate from the buffet and the main dining room. So there's lots of places to eat on a cruise. Now, there's lots of places to spend money to eat on a cruise as well, but those are all optional.
Hmm.
That's what's called specialty dining. And, I can remember a time not that long ago, Ross, maybe a couple of years before the pandemic, where I would say loudly, I'll never pay for food on a cruise. Um, well, I lied because, once you try specialty dining, I mean, it's specialty dining is equivalent to, and it depends on the ship and it depends on the restaurant, but equivalent to for most cities that we live in, equivalent to your better restaurants in that city.
Okay.
Um, and then there's other specialty dining that's not much different than, say, I don't know, a Chili's or whatever. So, uh, uh, specialty dining also runs the gamut from very, very low priced to pretty high price
Yeah.
and by world-renowned chefs. I tell anybody who's willing to listen, although it sounds like exaggeration. I had a meal on one cruise ship at one restaurant, and I've said it's the best meal I ever had. Period. Land, sea, anywhere. Now, it turns out it was a restaurant by, and some of your listeners will have heard of this gentleman. His name is Daniel Ballard. He's a French chef, but he has places in New York, Paris, all over the world. And this was his first branded restaurant on a cruise ship. And so, but that was that was a splurge, and that was on an anniversary cruise. But you don't have to do that. So that's food. And then it's the same thing with activities. Most ships, all ships have activities to some extent that are free. Now, ships that are more geared towards families and children, they'll have, a lot of things that keep the kids busy: roller
Hmm.
coasters, bumper cars, sports courts, basketball courts, soccer courts, even for the older uh, kids, pickleball courts. Um, None of that costs any money. But then there are a few activities on a cruise ship that, thrill-seeking activities where you have to pay a little extra.
Hmm.
But you don't have to do those things. There's plenty to do that that don't cost a penny. Same thing with excursions and tours. You don't have to buy any tours. We typically get an excursion if it's an island that we haven't been to, or stop we haven't been to. We'll typically take a tour, a paid tour, because we want to learn about the country and island and things like that. Especially islands that we think we might want to come back to. Sometimes, as a result of the tour, they can only show you so much in a few hours. But then in the tour, you hear other things about the country or the city, the town, that sounds really interesting. And so in your mind, you may say, this is a place I want to come back to, you
Yeah.
know. But there are other people who get off the ship and they totally go on their own. They hike, well, I don't want to say bike, you can rent bikes, but they hike, walk, uh, whatever, on their own. Um, and they see probably more of the country than I do on a guided tour.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I know we were just in Greece in September, in Santorini, Mykonos, mainly Santorini, where a lot of the cruise ships are stopping and people are doing day trips. So no, that makes sense. And it sounds like, it can be affordable. It's kind of like most vacations, right? Whether it's all inclusive, whether it's cruises, whether it's land, like there's ways to make it affordable, or there's ways to go have a good time and ball out and go do specialty dining, right? But I think you said it best. It's maybe on a cruise where you're just like, hey, this is our one of our vacations for the year. You don't do the specialty dining, but like you said, it was an anniversary trip, and sometimes those are the ones that you want to spend because it's more the experience, and you want to make it, that type of trip. So I think it's overall they can be very affordable, and I appreciate you sharing some of those tips. Are there any? I think for listeners, I'm thinking about first time people who've never gone on a cruise, or maybe they've gone on one and they have a lot of my listeners may have one kid they may be expecting. They may just be a couple who are busy professionals and or just have smaller families. Like, are there specific cruise lines that you recommend for people who are in the states and maybe anywhere else outside the states, just as they're getting started, or that you like?
Sure, it really depends on who's going. If
Yeah.
it's just a couple, uh, I would recommend a different cruise line. I might recommend a different cruise line than I would recommend if it's a couple with, you know, what's the Census Department say? 2.5 kids, you know. So
Yeah, yeah.
so yeah, it kind of depends. Like all cruise lines, almost all, because there are actually a couple of cruise lines that don't allow kids. But I was going to say is almost all cruise lines have like kids clubs.
Hmm.
So a young couple, with a couple of young kids, they can take the kids to the kids club, and then they can go and have a day together, or have a date night,
Yeah.
whatever. Um, uh, and it sounds like you're kind of getting rid of the kids, but not really, because I've been cruising since my grown daughters were kids,
Yeah.
and now my grandkids. I cruise with my grandkids, and I all of the children in my life have been absolutely addicted to the kids club.
Okay.
Because I mean, you're getting so much. attention and coddling and a lot more than you would probably get at home.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've had almost every trip. The last cruise I went on, I was very close. You know, not by choice, just happenstance. I was very close to the kids club, and you know, my wife and I would smile because sometime when we headed back to our room at night, you can tell that a kid is being picked up, and you can hear them crying because they don't want to leave. They never want to leave the kids club. So yeah, what I would recommend would vary depending on uh, a person or a couple's budget, a couple's family composition, and even if they have kids, maybe they want to get away from the kids. Maybe they have good babysitting. They have relatives who can babysit, and they want to go on a cruise to get away from
Yeah.
kids. And then I would recommend Virgin Voyages because that is a line that does not have kids,
Okay.
18 and over.
Okay.
And it's a line that is it's a little higher than a lot of lines, but it's affordable. There's
Yeah.
another line that doesn't have kids called Viking. Now Viking is high end,
Yeah.
higher end than Virgin. So I wouldn't put someone on Virgin for their first cruise. Although I have an appointment after this call with the young lady who she wants to go on a cruise, and she has limited resources. She's only looking for like a 4 or 5 day cruise,
Hmm.
and so I'm giving her I'm going to go over some choices with her, but one I threw in there was Virgin. It's for her and her mother, uh, and surprisingly, although they're a higher tier than the other cruises that I'm giving to her, it's surprisingly affordable,
Hmm.
and so she may opt for that. When I tell her no kids, she may like that. But I don't know. So we'll see. But
Okay.
yeah, that's so. What I would recommend. It's a long answer to your question, Ross. But what I would recommend depends on their circumstances. What do they want to get, and what do they want to get away from?
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's pretty cool. And I think it's something. Is that a service that you offer just in case that, if people are thinking about, hey, I've never gone on a cruise. I need, a expert advisor who's done this for coming up on 40 years, right? Like, the ins and outs. Is that a service that you offer?
I absolutely. I'm one of those guys. There are a few people who have had a bad experience on a cruise. I've never had a bad experience on a cruise. Um, I think the key and the reason that number is so high, and to get that number, over 90%, even higher, is you have to go on the right cruise.
Yeah.
So usually the people who have a bad first experience, there's a good chance they chose a bad cruise. Not necessarily. Now, if you go on a cruise and you get sick on day one and you're sick the whole cruise line, then cruising's just not for you, you know. Uh, Although, Ross, I've even heard of people who got sick on their first cruise, but they loved everything else about it. So they didn't get hooked necessarily on that first cruise, but they were willing to try it again, and they got hooked eventually.
Yeah.
So when I say over 90% get hooked on the first cruise, that number gets much closer to 100 if you talk about after the first couple of cruises.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think it's travel in general. Once you travel once, you're like, wow, this is what's out here. This is what I
That's
want
right.
to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's
that's right. When I went on my first cruise, I already was in love with travel. Not that
yeah.
I had done a lot, but it was pretty reasonable to go to the Caribbean,
Hmm.
on all inclusives. So I did it quite a bit. So I would say before we ever cruised, we probably went on. I don't know, 8 to 10 trips,
Hmm.
land trips to the Caribbean. Uh, and to be honest, once I started cruising, I don't think I have been on a land trip, but I haven't been on any of those all inclusives I used to go on
Yeah.
years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
Um,
That's pretty cool. It's I love hearing stories, and that's, one of the reasons why I have this podcast is so different people from different walks of life, different areas of travel can share those. And you bring a different area of expertise that obviously I don't have, you know, not ever being on a cruise. So it's helpful to see those insights. And that's always helpful too, I always think of it from when I was 22 and I started planning trips for myself, my group of friends, like going on our annual snowboarding trips all over North America, going over to Europe. Like, what were the questions and hesitations that I had? You know, I, I'm more of, I just take action. I'm just like, we'll figure it out. But some people, right, not doing that and be like, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? Like having that what if, just questions. I think sometimes that's the biggest first step is just thinking of, okay, this is what I need to do. And the tips you just provided are extremely valuable because that then helps people who might be either with just a couple, if it's adults only, if they have kids, the kids club zone, right? And they start to think about traveling and how do we make this affordable? You don't always have to ball out at the specialty dining, right? You can just, if you have that budget, but you want to get away, there's different options. I think in the sense of because Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Travel Tuesday, we're recording this on Travel Tuesday, right? I saw Royal Caribbean has some deals going on, but I don't know if there's anything like I know deals that went on over the long weekend were around TripAdvisor, Get Your Guide, Viator, Booking, Expedia, right? Priceline. There were just so many different ways to get deals, whether that's percentages off, whether that's cash back through Rakuten, or even just maximizing your miles. I use Capital One, so being able to get additional miles through that, and then kind of bonusing those on top of some of the travel portals
mhm.
that I just mentioned. Are there best areas or best times of the year or best deals that you look out for or you advise people to book through? Is it booked through those portals or is it through just directly the line? Like, talk to me more about that.
Well, now, of course, I'm going to speak out of self-interest. So I would, of course, you can book directly with the cruise line. Uh, uh, you can book with sites like Expedia and all that. Now, Expedia is really just a much more well-known, high-end version of what I do.
Yeah.
So at my site, which is the joy of vacation.com, if you go there, uh, you can sign, like we have like a weekly uh, update that comes out if you signed up at my site. And one easy way to sign up at my site, for all your listeners right now, they can go to that site and you can enter to win a free cruise.
Oh, nice.
So so when you enter to win that cruise, you're becoming part of my mailing list, uh, and so you'll get an update from us once a week. And I tell you, the updates that are coming out the last couple of weeks, I'm like looking at them like as like a almost like a tourist. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm looking at them and I'm salivating at some of the deals
Yep.
that I'm seeing coming across the screen. So the deals will find you if you sign up at my site.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I know that sounds like self-interest,
No,
but but
no.
I'm you can once you get one of these letters and or a couple of these letters and you don't find that they're helpful, you can remove yourself. But I guarantee if you're thinking about a cruise, you're going to like what you see because we have one of the biggest travel brands behind our agency, and so there's a lot of things that are offered from my site and sites like mine that you won't get necessarily if you call the cruise line. So, you kind of, one might think of the cruise lines as competition for independent travel agents like me, but they really are not. Uh, uh, they want to sell, they want to sell cabins on a ship, and
Hmm.
they do it any way they can.
Yep.
They're not going to do things to step on the toes of travel agents because they need travel agents. So yeah, you can go to those sites, but you're not going to be able to call up and talk to somebody and then call that same person up. You're going to be calling like a phone bank.
Yeah.
Whereas with an independent agent like me, you know, that's all you'll talk to, the same person each time, and then we can point you to some things that clearly. For instance, like when I talked to this young lady this afternoon, the cruises that I'm putting in front of her, I'm putting four cruises in front of her, and it's three different lines. Well, if you talk to a cruise line, you're not going to get that.
Yeah.
You know, you'd have to talk to three different cruise lines.
Yeah.
So
No, it's not self-interest at all. At the end of the day, you're providing a ton of value, and if people are interested in cruising, and instead of what you're doing, right, I do the same thing, different target market, but you're really providing that weekly update of, hey guys and girls, instead of going and having to scrub the internet or spend time wondering what these are, I'm hand delivering this to you, and I'm going to help you book that next cruise. And that's why I wanted to bring you on, is you provide a lot of that value when you're answering questions of, if this first timer has never been on a cruise, right? Like, what are the things they should look out for? And that's where you can help with some of those deals and save, at the end of the day, you're saving people a ton of time because you're
mhm.
giving them what your area of expertise is almost over, I mean, 40 years, right? And that's the beauty of it. And that is one of the things too, and that's why I asked about those sites. Yes, you can find good deals, and I mean, for me personally, when I first started traveling and I money was a little bit tighter, in my early 20s, right, I would go to Expedia. It's like, you get a flight, you get a hotel, but then if you have a misconnection or you have a hotel issue, right, like it wasn't booked there, the customer service, there's so many other challenges that it's not always just about if it's $100 cheaper. There's other reasons why it's $100 cheaper. Sometimes it's going to be a headache. So, as we like to say, sometimes you got to pay to play.
Yep, yep. And I don't want to make it sound like we only can help you with cruises because we can do all kind of travel. So,
Mhm.
when I went on my anniversary trip, that's a good example. That was we spent a week in countryside, if you will, of Italy, uh, uh, and then it was about 2 hours from Rome. So we rented a car and we drove to Rome, which I wouldn't do this again because I've since learned that Italy has an unbelievably good rail system.
Oh yeah, everywhere in Europe.
Yep, yep. But so we rented a car and drove to Italy, and we did that for a couple of days, and then we got on a cruise, and it was our first cruise in the Mediterranean. Now I didn't have the travel business at the time, but I could have done all of that through the travel business. So you can there's land plus cruise things that you can do.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Since we're on the topic of, I mean, the Mediterranean Italy cruise, that sounds amazing. I guess, are there any that stand out, like that have been your favorites that you've been on, and I think it's kind of a two-part question. For you, what maybe stands out that you love and you would recommend, but also for first timers, is there anything that's like a kind of bucket list destination, but maybe an easier path to go? You can answer
Well,
those separately.
yeah, now I don't want to make it sound like, oh, let's jet off to the Mediterranean on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I've been there twice. Uh, the first time, uh, the cruise ship that I took was the Celebrity Beyond, and it happens to be my favorite cruise ship. Um, Now, maybe it was because of the sentimental value, 30th anniversary, but it was
Hmm.
just it was a gorgeous ship. There was so much that was good about it, so that's a way to do the Mediterranean. It's kind of it's kind of a high end ship.
Hmm.
It's not luxury, but it's considered premium. Um, but then the second time I experienced the Mediterranean, I went on another line, a different line, Virgin, which is also not luxury but premium. So it's high end, but not super high end. Uh, but it was much more affordable because it was what's known as a transatlantic cruise. So transatlantic, you leave from the U.S. Uh, and you end up in somewhere in Europe, in our case in Barcelona, Spain, but then you have to fly back.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh, and the reason most transatlantics are are very reasonable. I paid a lot less for that transatlantic to the Mediterranean than I did for the other cruise to the Mediterranean. And the reason, Ross, is because a lot of transatlantics are called repositioning cruises.
Hmm.
So the Celebrity Beyond was going to be doing Europe uh, for you know the rest of the year. Not the Celebrity Beyond, the Virgin Voyages Scarlet Lady was going to be doing Europe cruises. They had been doing U.S. cruises. So their U.S. season was over, and then they were getting ready to start their Europe season. So to start their Europe season, they had to reposition themselves to Europe. And so my transatlantic cruise is known as a repositioning cruise. And they tend to be a lot cheaper than cruises that are not repositioning cruises.
Okay.
Um, and so, that's something you want to think about. If you're interested in Europe, um, you know, think about a repositioning cruise. Now they're going to happen once a year for a particular cruise ship, so that they can be relocate to where they're
Hmm.
going to cruise from for the next several months.
How long
Uh,
does that take to get across?
So the repositioning cruise was, I believe it was, I don't want to get it right. I think it was 15 days.
Okay.
And whereas my regular med cruise was 9 days.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
Okay.
now
That
the
makes
only
sense.
problem with a repositioning cruise, it's great for me
Yeah.
because my thing on a cruise is basically chill,
Yeah. Okay. I would.
relaxing, just looking out at the water, writing. I call a lounge chair on the deck, looking out at the ocean. I call that the best office in the world, you
Love that.
know, and the thoughts just flow
Yep.
to my mind. And so you know. Uh, but then, you do all the things that you do on a normal cruise. There's activities on sea days, and there's excursions on days that you don't stop at that many places. We made 3 stops on the reposition cruise, whereas on the regular Mediterranean cruise, in 9 days we made 8 stops.
Oh, wow.
You
Okay.
know, so repositioning cruise is kind of different than a regular cruise. But so that's just an example for your listeners of 2 ways to see Europe.
Yeah.
Uh, One's a lot cheaper than the other.
Yeah.
And it has its advantages and disadvantages. On that transatlantic cruise, we had 8 straight sea days. So eight
Okay.
days with no land.
Yeah.
And after around day 6, my wife was like, "I need land. I need land." But
Well,
so
yeah. I was gonna say, I think it goes back to what we were talking about, right? Thinking about what do you like, and then like you were talking about with your upcoming call is different options, and that's the goal, right? Is it isn't there isn't just one way to travel. It goes off personal preferences. It goes off what do you like to do? You like to
Yeah.
chill. Some people may say, I want to do all the activities in the world. I want to have a gym on the cruise so I can work out. I'm active, whatever that may be, and just figuring out how much PTO or how much time off do you have? Do you have kids? If you don't have kids, right? Like, what have you liked about travel in the past? Something that you know, you had mentioned that 90% of people who go on cruises like them. I mean, sometimes if they have been on one, they'll like it. If most people who have traveled over to Europe or other places, whether it's by cruise, land, or rail or whatever, a lot of the times they're like, "Oh, I want to go do this more." So it just comes back to planning and thinking about what you like and leaning in on experts, right, who have done it and asking those questions and using their expertise and blueprints and just getting those tips and tricks for them because it really, like you had mentioned, going through you, yes, you may get an email, but at the end of the day, it's saving people time, money, lessons learned, headaches that you've been doing this 40 years, right? I've been traveling 25. I've been planning trips and doing this 10 plus years. So like there's a lot of lessons learned. And I
Hmm.
think we'll both admit that we've screwed up, right? We know what's comfortable. We know, right, what products to travel with, what not to do, what to do before, during, after. And yeah, that's I appreciate you sharing a lot of those tips. Those are really helpful.
Yeah. As I said, there is a cruise for everyone.
Yeah. 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 No, well, I appreciate it. I guess one last question. I always like to ask this. It'd be, what's one piece of advice that you'd, give someone who, I'll use me for example, right? Like if I've only been on land and I've never done an all inclusive, I've never done a cruise, and I'm ready to go, like what's one piece of advice you give me? And then also maybe for someone who's never traveled at all, like what's one piece of advice you give them?
Well, again, this is going to sound self-serving, but if you've never been on a cruise, my advice is use either a travel advisor for your first time, or talk to a well-traveled resource. You know, because both of those parties can help you avoid huge mistakes.
Yeah.
And a huge mistake, well, just a mistake can just can ruin your trip.
Yeah.
So and again, I know that's kind of as one piece of advice that may seem self-serving, but I would never book a cruise and then figure I'll just kind of learn what I need to know once I get on it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
No, it's very true. I
you could end up booking a cruise, you and your kids, and it's on a cruise ship where the average age is 70.
Yeah.
I mean that could very easily happen if
Yep.
you don't know, if you don't know a whole lot about cruising.
Yep.
Uh, and you'll probably have a decent time on that ship where the average age is 70. Uh, but you won't have the best time you could have had.
Yeah. Yeah. No, very true. Well,
It's
hey,
just it's just so hard for me to imagine unless there's some outside impetus. It's very hard for me to imagine someone not having a good time on a cruise. Now that outside impetus, a lot of times it's things you can't control, weather,
yeah.
illness, mechanical problems, things like that,
But
which
that
all by the way could happen with a regular trip as
Oh,
well.
yeah, it's with land, it could be flight delays. That's not uncommon, right? There
Yeah.
could be weather, there could be rain. Obviously, you try to plan around those things, right? Don't travel to places during hurricane season or during their wet and rainy season. But I think that's the one thing that I've learned is it's not just you it's happening to. There's sometimes 300 other people on a flight. If you're on a cruise, it's X amount of people. It's happening to everyone. So you're on vacation, but I think it goes back to what you had mentioned at the beginning is, and what I talk about nonstop is just planning and,
Yeah,
going in with a plan and working with the right people and not just showing up and thinking, right, like you're going to figure it out on there because you'll learn lessons. And you put in a little bit of work on the front end, you're going to have a great time during, and you're going to get to enjoy that vacation and do what you like to do most, which is chill.
yeah, that's important. What you said about planning and putting in work ahead of time. You know, just one quick, for instance, someone who's new to cruising, I could see them doing everything right, but then they book their flight on the same day the cruise ship leaves. Uh, and their flight might get in at 8 a.m. and the cruise ship leaves at 5 p.m. So that sounds okay. But my advice is never fly in the day of your cruise.
Yeah.
Uh, you just don't do it.
Yeah.
Um, and people have to learn. Unfortunately, a lot of times people have to learn the hard way
Mhm.
uh, because they just say, well, what, that's not going to happen to me. Well, you can't control flight delays and things like that. Um, but I can tell you what, the ship won't wait for you.
Yeah.
Uh, so,
Yeah.
but
No.
yeah, and that's the kind of thing that you would only learn about if you talk to someone who's cruised quite a bit. Doesn't have to be a travel advisor, but talk to someone who's cruised a bit. It's kind of funny, Ross. It's a little off subject, but I give a lot of advice online. I go into cruise groups and I'll see somebody kind of a discussion kind of going, I think, sideways, the wrong
Yeah.
direction, and I'll try to put in my 2 cents. One thing I like to tell new cruisers or relatively new cruisers, you know, at least on your first cruise or your first few cruises, always go on excursions that are put out by the cruise line.
Hmm.
Because you don't have to do that. If you want to go on a city tour of, I don't know, Pisa in Italy,
Hmm.
uh, you know, the cruise line might have a city tour for $75 a person.
Hmm.
Uh, well, you can get to the pier, go to a taxi, and he or she can drive you around, hit the same places for $45 a person. And my advice to relatively new cruisers is always choose the cruise ship excursion because they come with a promise to never leave you behind.
Yep.
Okay. Whereas the taxi that you save, 40, 50% by taking the taxi, that's cool, saving money. But what if they get a flat tire?
Yep.
You know, the cruise line will not wait because
Yeah.
they have nothing to do with that taxi company.
Yep.
So one of the things I always do is advise newbie cruisers always take the ship's excursion. They'll never leave you. Well, now you won't hear me say they'll never leave you anymore because, and this is a little marketing of an upcoming episode, but I have an episode coming up where a family did just that. They
Oh,
took a
wow. Okay.
cruise ship excursion, a family of 9. They took a cruise ship excursion, and because of reasons that are, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but because of reasons, they got left behind.
Wow. And that's 9 people. That's not just like a couple or three or four. That's a whole, you got almost a starting five and a bench.
Yeah, they got left
Wow.
behind in Alaska,
Oh,
and they lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so this made, by the way, as some of your listeners may be slightly familiar with it, because it made world news.
oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
not just cruise news; it made world news.
You
Uh,
gotta,
but but I have that family coming on my podcast in a couple of weeks. So but that's one piece of advice that I have to reword now because I won't say
Yeah.
they promise to never leave you, but there is an implied promise. I guess is how I'll
Okay.
reword it.
Okay. No, and I think that just goes back to, before we wrap up here is go if you're wanting to cruise, even if you want to travel and you want more tips and tricks, Paul is the expert here. That you aren't going to get that just from going on some of the bigger booking sites, right? He's going to give you that valuable information that's going to be really your guide to help you streamline that. Not make those are big lessons, right? Getting stuck in Alaska with a family of nine. So he's really going to help you there from his email list, his podcast. Again, it's valuable. This has been extremely valuable for me. I just learned a ton. I know a lot of my audiences asked for things around cruising, and I obviously couldn't give that to them personally. So that's why I wanted to bring you on as the expert. And I know you're 20, 25 miles up to 20, 25 minutes up the street from me. So if we do decide to go on a cruise, the good news is I can buy you a cup of coffee, buy you some lunch, and if we need to, we can go out on the boat and cruise on Lake Norman and chill there.
Hey, I like to hear that, Ross.
Absolutely. Well, hey, I know you mentioned what listeners could do, but if you don't mind just reiterating, right, where they can sign up for that newsletter, your name of your podcast, any social media that can help get them started cruising soon.
Yeah, the podcast is a great help because it's just people from all over the world who've been on cruises. Some are very, very experienced cruiseaholics, to use that word again. Some are on there. I call them, and you can't see me, but I'm doing air quotes. Uh, Ordinary cruisers with extraordinary stories. So
Okay.
some may have gone on one cruise, but I saw fit to bring them on the podcast. So that comes out. The Joy of Cruising podcast comes out every Thursday, and then on many Mondays. On Mondays we have a bonus episode, and I think throughout the holidays we have shows every Monday and Thursday. But anyway, you can access it on all your major podcast sites. But if you're not normally a podcast listener, just go to www.thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. So
Okay.
that's the podcast, and then the travel agency again is www.thejoyofvacation.com, and just sign up for the weekly letter. Won't hurt you. It won't cost you anything, and it won't spam you. That's all you'll get. But you can always take yourself off after a while if you want to. And then I have three books on cruising. You can buy them all at the Amazon. The first one's called The Joy of Cruising. The second one is called Cruising Interrupted. How many of you can figure out that came out around the time of the pandemic? And then the newest one, sort of a celebration of the return of cruising. It's called The Joy of Cruising Again. So they're all on Amazon, so you can find those on your own.
I love it. I love it. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on. And to the listeners, I'll share all of those links within the show notes to make it easily clickable, as well as Paul's website and his podcast. So we appreciate you all tuning in again. Paul, thanks for coming on. It was great to learn. Looking forward to staying in contact and continuing to talk to you. And I know who to go to when we plan a cruise.
Well, thank you, Russ. I enjoyed it, and I appreciate you allowing me this platform to talk to your listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. Just trying to spread the good word and help people out and make them not make the same mistakes. So hope you have a good day and we'll talk soon.
All right, you do the same.
Thanks.